Everyone was gathered at my daughter's house. Everyone except me. I stayed where I always stayed. In the kitchen. My name is Evelyn Collins, and once this house felt like home. Now it felt like a place I moved through quietly, like a shadow that didn't belong to the light. I pulled a tray of shortbread cookies from the oven, my mother's recipe worn and stained with time. Baking was the last thing that still made me feel useful, as if my hands remembered who I had been before the world made me smaller. I arranged the cookies carefully, wiped my hands on my apron, and stepped onto the patio. Conversations paused. A few people turned and smiled politely. One woman took a cookie and said it was wonderful. That was when Lauren laughed. "Oh, she just kind of lives here," she said casually, waving toward me as if I were a piece of furniture. "You know, like part of the house." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, just awkward, but it still stung. My fingers tightened around the tray. No one corrected her. No one spoke up. Even Eric, her husband, met my eyes for a second before quickly looking away. I nodded, forced a small smile, and went back inside. For the rest of the evening I washed glasses, cleared plates, and wiped counters until they shone. No one thanked me. When the last guest left and Lauren's heels clicked upstairs, Eric passed behind me and murmured, "Thanks, Evelyn," before disappearing. "Not Mom. Just Evelyn." 3 days later, a glass slipped from my hands and shattered across the kitchen floor. Before I could even apologize, Lauren stormed in. "What did you do now?" she snapped. "I bent to pick up the pieces." "I'm sorry, She raised her hand. "You should know your place. Don't act like you belong here." Her words hit harder than the broken glass. Then she pulled out her phone. "Get out or I'll call the police." I froze. She wasn't joking. I stepped into the garden, surrounded by rosemary and daisies I had planted myself. The sun felt too bright. The air felt too thin. And in that moment I understood something painful and clear. This wasn't my home anymore. But it was still my house. And for the first time in years I felt awake. Long before laughter echoed through someone else's party, before I learned how to disappear in my own daughter's home, there was another house. A house that knew my name. A house that watched me grow older, love deeper, and survive loss. It was the spring of 1983 when Paul and I first stood in front of that tired Victorian. The paint was cracked, the porch sagged, and the windows rattled when the wind passed through. Most people would have turned away. But Paul smiled like he was looking at a dream. "It's got good bones," he said, running his hand along the banister. We had been married 16 years by then. No fancy vacations, no big celebrations. We saved every dollar, skipped comfort, and built our life slowly. Our honeymoon had been in a borrowed cabin, cooking canned soup on a tiny stove and sharing one blanket in the cold. That was our kind of luxury togetherness. Lauren was 6 when we moved in. I still remember her running across the living room floor while Paul balanced on a ladder, painting the walls. She laughed as green paint dotted her cheek, spinning like she owned the world. We didn't have much money, but we had warmth. That house held our birthdays, our worries, our quiet victories. When Paul lost his job, the house heard our fears. When he found work again, it heard our cheers. When Lauren scraped her knees or cried over school, those walls held her echoes. Then, in 2006, Paul got sick. We moved his bed downstairs because the stairs were too much for him. I cooked soup, rubbed his back, whispered stories until he fell asleep. One morning he didn't wake up. The sunlight rested on his face like a goodbye. After that, the house felt too big, too quiet. His voice lived in every corner, and some days the loneliness felt heavier than the walls. In 2011, Lauren suggested I move in with her. "You won't be alone anymore," she said. "We have space." I hesitated. That house was mine. But loneliness can convince you to let go of things you shouldn't. So I packed my memories, rented out the old home, and moved into Lauren's guest room. What she never knew was this: I never signed the house away. The deed stayed in my name. Some part of me, maybe instinct, maybe fear, knew I needed something that was still mine. And as I sat in her quiet guest room, staring at Paul's photo, I realized something painful. I had given enough. At first, Lauren's behavior was quiet. Not loud enough to cause a scene, not cruel enough to confront, just sharp enough to remind me I was no longer welcome. She didn't raise her voice often. She preferred small cuts. Rules, sighs, looks of irritation whenever I spoke too long or existed too much. It started with little requests. "Could you stop cooking with strong spices? The smell lingers. Try to stay in your room after 9. We need calm evenings. Please don't invite people without asking first." I agreed to everything. I didn't want to be a burden. I folded laundry neatly, cleaned the kitchen, watered her garden, and stayed quiet. Over time, my world shrank to one bedroom and a narrow role. Be useful but never be seen. One night, I went downstairs for a glass of milk. I stopped when I heard their voices in the living room. "She's always here," Lauren said. "It's exhausting. Like emotional clutter." The words froze me in place. Emotional clutter. Not a mother. Not a widow. Just something taking up space. I went back to my room without a sound. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. But something inside me changed. I stopped speaking, not because I was weak, but because I was remembering. Then one afternoon, Lauren sat across from me with a folder in her hands. She smiled too politely. "Mom, I need a small favor," she said. "Just some paperwork. It'll make things easier for us." My stomach tightened. "For what?" I asked. "The house," she said lightly. "It should be in my name. Just for taxes and refinancing. Nothing changes." I looked at her carefully. "No," I said. "That house is still mine." Her smile vanished. She stood and left without another word. A week later, my bank called. They asked about a loan application connected to my address. Confused, I requested details. What they sent made my hands shake. Lauren had tried to take a loan using my house. The documents claimed she was the owner. The signatures were forged. The story said she had taken over care of her elderly mother. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was theft. That evening, I confronted her calmly. She didn't deny it. She laughed. "You don't own this house," she said. "You live here because we allow you." Then she stepped closer. "If you won't cooperate," she said coldly, "you have 1 week to leave, or I'll call the police and say you're trespassing." In that moment, I realized something painful and clear. My daughter didn't just want me gone. She wanted everything. But she had forgotten one thing. The house was still mine. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind felt strangely calm, like the moment after a storm breaks. Before dawn, I packed a small suitcase. Only what mattered. Clean clothes, my wallet, Paul's photograph, our marriage certificate, his death papers, and the most important thing of all, the deed to the house. I left without making a sound. By morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table of Paul's oldest friend, Walter. a retired lawyer who had known us since we were young and hopeful. He read through the documents slowly, adjusting his glasses. "Evelyn," he said softly, "this house is legally yours. She has no claim." For the first time in years, I felt safe. "I want to sell it," I said. "As soon as possible." Walter didn't question me. He only nodded. That same afternoon, I met a realtor named Jessica. She moved quickly, professionally, with no judgment. She listed the house privately. No open homes, no delays. By sunset, there were 3 serious offers. I chose the one that felt right, not because of the money, but because the buyer sounded like someone starting over, just like me. I signed the contract without shaking. That night, my phone buzzed again and again. "Lauren." I didn't answer. The next morning, a courier delivered a certified envelope to her door. Inside was the legal notice. The house had been sold. The new owner would take possession. 7 days to vacate. For the first time, Lauren tasted the silence she had fed me for years. She called me. Once. Twice. 10 times. I never picked up. I wasn't running anymore. I was standing still. Finally in my own life. The apartment was small, but it was mine. High above the noise of the city, I stood at the window and watched the lights flicker like stars brought down to earth. Cars moved below like glowing threads, weaving lives together. For the first time in years, I wasn't listening for footsteps, criticism, or rules. I was finally alone, in the best way. I used part of the money from the sale to buy this place outright. No debt. No strings. Just peace. The first thing I did was place a small herb pot on the balcony. Mint. Paul used to love the smell. Some mornings, I crushed a leaf between my fingers and let the scent drift into my coffee. It reminded me that life still had room to grow. Lauren called again after the eviction notice. I saw her name light up my phone again and again. I didn't answer. Not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to explain. She had already heard me for years. She had simply chosen not to listen. One night the intercom buzzed. I checked the screen. It was her. Her hair was messy, her eyes red, her coat too thin for the cold. She looked smaller than I remembered, no longer powerful, no longer untouchable. Just human. "Mom," she whispered, voice breaking. "Please. Just for a little while. I have nowhere to go." For a long moment, I said nothing. I looked at her the way I once did when she was a child, waiting for me to fix things. But some lessons must be learned alone. I spoke calmly, softly. "Don't ever think you can trick an old woman, especially your own mother." Her eyes filled with tears. She nodded once, slowly, like she finally understood. I closed the curtain. Not in anger. Not in revenge. But in certainty. Silence isn't weakness. It is memory sharpening its blade. I used to believe loyalty meant staying quiet. But now I know, sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stand up and walk away. And for the first time in my life, I am finally home.